Hello and welcome to today's lesson. Our objective today is to learn about equivalent fractions. But before we begin, remember to like, subscribe and turn on your bell notifications as they really do help. I release a new lesson every single Friday and I release a how to sign video every single day. Right then, and one more thing. I want to thank today's sponsor of today's video, Rado Photography. Here's an example of one of her photographs. Here's a shoot that my wife and I did a few years ago, a maternity shoot. As you can see, apologies for the grainness of my camera, but she's a fantastic photographer. She's got a fantastic eye. She does maternity shoots, weddings, newborn shoots, which we've got as well. Absolutely brilliant. She's based in the Gloucestershire area. So if you're interested, I'll leave the link to her Instagram bio below. Right, moving on to today's lesson. So as you can see here, our objective today is to understand equivalent fractions, and to do that, we're going to be using a number line. So as always, here's our starter question. Pause the video here, and then when you're ready, we'll go through the answers. Okay, so question number one was which shapes have half shaded? So now for fractions, when we divide shapes up, they've got to be equal parts. Okay, so as you can see, the circle is equal, the rectangle is, and the square is. The triangle, both parts are not equal, so that's why it's not half shaded. The second one says which shapes have 2/4 shaded. Okay, so if you look closely, we've got the circle, the rectangle, and the square again, but again, not the triangle. Right, let's get ready to learn. So here's our number line. It starts at 0 and ends in 1, so one whole. And we've got a line directly in the middle. And we've got two pieces of equal size. So we've got 2 halves. So we mark that, because this is the first half, we mark it as 1/2, or a half. The second one, the whole, is equivalent to 2 halves. There's one half, there's the other half. Okay, we're going to repeat another number line underneath, but this time we divided it into 4s. And rather than saying a fourth, we say quarters. So here we've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and a whole is worth 4/4. Okay. Now, as you can see, the number lines are the same length, so they're both the same as a whole. As you can see here, the 2/4 is directly underneath a half. So we say they are equal or equivalent. Okay, so equal. Okay, this is the Macedon sign for same, which I use for equal because it means the same thing. So equal. So 1/2 is equal to 2/4. And 2 halves is the same as 4/4, or equal to. And you can see that's because they're directly underneath each other on the number lines. Here's another number line. But this time we divide into 3 pieces, or thirds. We represent that as 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3. Okay, so it's all divided into thirds. Another number line underneath now. Ooh, there's lots here. Let's count them. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces. So remember, we don't count the 0, but we do count the 1. So we've got 9 pieces. We call these fractions ninths. So we're going to label them 1/9. Oh, it's all automatic. But as you can see, it's from 1/9 all the way to 9/9. Now have a look which fractions are equivalent or equal to. Pause video here and then we'll continue. Okay, so let's have a look which fractions were equivalent. So as you can see, 3/9 is equal to 1/3. And 2/3 is equal to 6/9. And 3/3 is equivalent to 3/9. Sorry, 3/3 is equivalent to 9/9. Sorry, it's a little bit there. Okay. Pause the video here and have a think which fractions are equivalent to each other. So we're looking at the top fractions are equal to the ones underneath. Okay, let's have a look which fractions are equivalent. So I know that a quarter is equivalent to 2/8 because they're directly underneath. 2/4 is equivalent to 4/8. 3/4 is equivalent to 6/8. So just before we go on to the worksheet. So as you can see, the equivalent fractions are always directly underneath each other. If they're not equivalent. Okay, so we're going to use those number lines to help us in our answers now. So we're going to move on to questions 1, 2, and 3 on the worksheet. Let's minimize that. Okay, so we're going to use the number lines here to help us. Okay, so apologize for it being a little bit small, but I wanted to make sure the whole question was in on your screen. Okay, so we're going to use this to help us. So I'm going to do A, and I'd like you to do B and C. So it says a half is equivalent to so many sixths. Okay, so I'm going to look, so the sixth at the bottom, we call that the denominator. So we're looking for the number line with a sixth on the bottom, which is the second one down. Now it says a half. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to circle the half with the equivalent sixth underneath. And as I can see, it's 3/6. So I'm going to write a 3 on the top here because the 6 is already underneath. I'll rub that out. Use the technique now to answers B and C. Pause the video here so you can. Okay, we're going to move on to question 2 now. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit for this one. There we go. So we're going to use the number lines to complete the equivalent fractions. I will do the first one and you can complete it. So 1/4 is equivalent to how many eighths? So I'm going to circle the 1/4 and the fraction underneath. So that's 2/8. I'll write 2 there. I'm going to change the colour now so it stands out better. Then it's, how many quarters are equal to 6/8? So I'm going to work upside down. I find 6/8 and I draw my equivalent fraction. I'm going to go up this time. So if I look up from 6/8, it's 3/4. Okay. And then finally for 4/8, I'm going to change my color again. There we go. So 4/8 is equivalent to how many quarters? So I'm going to go up again. There's 4/8. I draw up and it's equivalent to 2/4. Okay. So use that technique now. If I just zoom out a little bit, there you go. So answers B and C. Yep, you can just about see that. I've already filled in the number line for you because I appreciate you can't write that on screen. So use the number lines to answers B and C. Pause the video here so you can. All right, then we're going to move on to question 3. Okay, so there we go. So we're going to use the double number line to complete the equivalent fractions. So what we've done here, rather than having 2 separate number lines, we've put one number line along the top and the second number line underneath, so squish them together. All right, so I'm going to answer A, and then I'll leave you guys to do B to F. I'm going to go back to the green pen. So it says here 6/12 is the equivalent to how many sixths? So again, using what I've done on questions 1 and 2, I'm going to circle 6/12 and go up to find the equivalent fraction and find that it is 3/6. So I'm going to write a 3 here. Okay, so using that technique, pause the video here to answer the rest of the questions. Okay, then we're going to move on to back onto the PowerPoint. So have a look closely here at these 2 number lines. Okay, they both start at 0 and they both end in 1. So are they equivalent? Okay, so if we circled them, my thing, a half is equivalent to 3/4. Okay, but pause the video here to see if that, to think, is that correct? Look carefully at the length of the number lines. Okay, so I hope you got had time to think. We look the length of the number lines are different, okay? And we can't compare them because they're different. We can only compare number lines that are the same length and start and end with the same number, okay? So now that we've got two number lines the same length and they start and end with the same numbers, we can compare them. So as you can see, a half is equivalent to 2/4, not 3/4. Okay, so using that knowledge now, it's time to have a go at questions 4 and 5. So we've just covered what happens if you get your number lines the wrong way round. So Tiny, the turtle, has been drawing number lines to find equivalent fractions. Pause the video here to think, what mistake has Tiny made? Okay, moving on to question 5, which I've crossed out because I appreciate you can't draw the number lines at home. So you've only got to answer question 4 here. Let's move back onto the PowerPoint. Right, so estimate now where 3/8 would go on the number line. Okay, so our answers are not going to be exact. Whenever a question says estimate, what the teacher is looking for is, can you use your knowledge to make an educated guess where it would go? So pause the video here to have a think. Okay, so let's have a look. So if we divided this number line into eighths, okay, we can see that 3/8 would go in between 1/4 and 2/4. In fact, it would go halfway between. So if you're estimating, as a teacher, I'd be looking for you to place the 3/8 roughly in the middle. There'd be a little bit of room for error, depending on how you draw the number lines, but that's what I'd be looking for, okay? So we know that 2/8, okay, is equivalent to 1/4, and 4/8 is equivalent to 2/4. So therefore, 3/8 would be in the middle. Okay. So how I would answer this, sorry, just checking there wasn't anything else on this PowerPoint. How I would answer this question is I would draw the lines on top of the number line and divide the other half into eighths. Once I've done that, I would count the eighths across and to find where the 3/8 would be. Okay. All you have to remember is that the distance between each eighth must be the same. So the way I would do that is, if it's already in quarters, I would just half each of the quarters along the top. Okay. And now it's time to have a go at the rest of the worksheet. And here's question 6. So Jack is estimating where 9/10 belongs on the number line. Okay. He says, I know that 9/10 must be to the right of 4/5. How does Jack know this? Let's have a think. Well, I know that 10 is double 5. So if I halve each fifth like that, I'm effectively doubling the number from fifths to tenths. And now I would count along. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's try now. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9/10 would be there. So that is how Jack knows this. Okay. So have you done a bit of hard work for you now? You can have a go at question B. Estimate where 3/10 and 7/10 would belong on the number line. Pause the video here to answer the question. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's lesson. We'll go through the answers now. Zoom back to question 1. Okay, we're going to use the number lines to help us. So a half is equivalent to, I'm just going to zoom out just so you can see all the number lines. So a half is equivalent to how many eighths? So I'm going to circle from a half all the way down. And as I can see, it's equivalent to 4/8. So I'm going to circle that one. And then the question asks me, a half is equivalent to how many tenths? So again, starting with a half, all the way down to a tenth this time, circle all the way back up. And as I can see, it's equivalent to 5/10. Okay. There is a little bit of a bonus question if you notice. It says, what do you notice? Okay, well, hopefully you notice with your answers that that the numerator at the top is half the denominator at the bottom. So 3 is half of 6, 4 is half of 8, and 5 is half of 10. And that's a way of always working out your equivalent fractions to a half. Okay, let's move on to question 2. So 2/10 is equivalent to how many? Oh, no. There we go. Nearly. Always read the question carefully. It says 2/10. So I'm going from the bottom again. So 2/10 is equivalent to 1/5. I'm going to alternate the colours again. Orange this time. So 4/5 now is equivalent to how many tenths? So I'm going to start at 4/5, go around, and that's equivalent to 8/10. And then 3/5, which is there, is equivalent to 6/10. There we go. And C, 6/9. Start with green again. In fact, I'm going to go in black this time, only because I've used green and purple, and I don't want to confuse anybody. So 6/9 is equivalent to, let's circle that, 2/3. Let's use blue this time. 1/3 is equivalent to 3/9. And then 3/3, let's use red this time, is equivalent to 9/9. Okay, which are all, and I'm going to write this in, they are both equal to 1 whole. When your numerator, which is the top number, and your denominator, which is the bottom number, are equal, they will equal 1 whole. Okay, that fraction will equal 1 whole. Okay, moving on to question 4 now. Oh no, sorry, that was question 2. Moving on to question 3. So I've answered A. So I'm going to just stick with green now. I'm just going to write that out each time. So B, 2/12. So we'll go from here. Is equivalent to 1/6. We're about each time now. 5/6 is equivalent to 10/12. 12/12 is equivalent to 6/6. As you can see here, if the numerator and denominator, the top and bottom numbers of the fraction, are going to be the same, their equivalent fraction will have the same as well. So if it's 6 at the bottom, it will definitely be 6 at the top, and that equals 1. And then here, for E, we know the top line doesn't have 8 as a numerator, so it's going to be the bottom. So the only one that's got 8 as a numerator will be 8/12. And as you can see, that matches with the 4/6, which is so the 4 is the numerator for 4/6, which is the top number. So this time it was 8/12 and 4/6. And then finally, we wanted 4/12. You have to do both the numerator and the denominator, which is the top and bottom number. So 4/12 is equivalent to 2/6. Okay. Moving on to question 4. As you remember from the PowerPoint, our number lines have to be the same size. As you can see, there's a difference there. So the mistake is made is the number lines. And I deliberately write it using my stylus pen here to model how I would expect a pupil to write this as well. Okay, but if you typed it, if you're using a computer to do that, brilliant. So the number lines are different lengths. Okay, they need to be the same length. Moving on to now question 6. Skip question 5. I'd answered A. So actually, if you put these lines in for your tenths, then part B is really simple, because 3/10 would be here. If I'm going to do it in purple so it stands out, and I'm going to zoom in as well. 3/10 would be there, and then 7/10 would be here. And there you go. And you can see by adding to a worksheet, making notes on it, adding to a number line, makes estimating questions a lot easier. I would always encourage people to make notes on their worksheets and do the same with exam papers as well. They're your notes, okay? As long as they are, they have a purpose, there is no reason why you can't do that to any piece of work, okay? And as you can see, by doing so, it makes your workings out much easier, okay? And it shows the teacher or the examiner exactly what you're trying to think, okay? Never ever assume that the examiner or teacher knows what you're doing. I always say to my students, if you think it, write it, okay? So thank you very much for joining me for today's lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Goodbye.